All right, part four. So, while I was in Spain, I had these two adorable little kids in my homestay. One of them was named Aaron. I remember the first time that I I met the family. Aaron and I we went upstairs, and he had a ton of toys, a ton of animal toys. And I just asked him. I kind of went through the animal toys, and I asked him to identify all of these toys. Amazingly, he went through like 100 different animals. And I would just pick up the toy, show it to him, and say, ¿Y qué animal es este? You know, something like that. And I remember thinking, wow, what a great way to learn. I'm sitting there holding some blocks. I've got a 3, 4-year-old teaching me Spanish words that I never knew before. And it was such a humbling experience to learn Spanish from a little kid, and I think that these types of experiences where you're very humble are great because it teaches you that, hey, as good as your Spanish, as good as you think you might be in a language, there's always some little kid that knows more than you do. You'll never stop learning. So while I was in Spain, as I mentioned, I was at Carlos III University, and I took some classes. One of the classes that I took was a bilingual class for superior level. No, it was a bilingual class for superior level native speakers. And in that class, we kind of talked about little nuances that could distinguish an Americanized Spanish from a proper Castilian Spanish. It was a really great class. And later on, after the first semester, I actually took classes with Spaniards. So I started taking like German philosophy class, sociology class with other Spanish students who were, I think, freshmen and sophomores. And that was a really great experience because I kind of got to see the way that the Spanish university classroom is managed. Um, Honestly, I wasn't very impressed. I was impressed with the professors, don't get me wrong. I was not impressed with the students and the caliber of discipline at the university level. I felt that the students were very disrespectful. It was almost like high school. Even at high school my um, in my hometown of Palo Alto, I never saw students, talking in class while the teacher was trying to get the class's attention, or like turning their back to the teacher. Things like that. It was just, for me, it was unfathomable. So while I was in those classes, I definitely, owned my Spanish, um, and I was able to kind of improve, by my formal Spanish by writing essays, reading a lot, and I also had some, conversation partners that I was able to practice my Spanish with. I'd say one of the best things that helped me with my Spanish was that I actually got a job at J&J's bookstore in Madrid as a language exchange host. So as a language exchange host, my job was basically to welcome people to the bookstore and cafe. They would have a language exchange twice per week, and my job was just to welcome people, talk to them, facilitate Spaniards that wanted to learn English, and kind of connect people, right? And of course, I didn't have my work permit, so it wasn't really a formal job. It was more like a volunteer thing. They would give me some drinks, for free, and it was a really fantastic experience because at that time I realized like that people really want to learn English. This is something really valuable. And I think for anybody that's learning Spanish, you have to remember that your language, English, is so important to the Spanish-speaking world right now. And while I was, working as a language exchange host, I just realized everybody has such an intense interest in my English. And you have to really use that, leverage that when you're looking for language exchanges. Find somebody that's as passionate about English as you are about Spanish. And I think that's one really key point. Now, I got to travel a lot throughout Spain. I went to let's see, I went to Sevilla, I went to Salamanca, Zaragoza. No, I didn't go to Zaragoza. I just went to a bunch of different places. And I think what I loved about Spain is that you don't need to travel outside of Spain. You're in Europe, if you want to find, if your interest is really finding out about diverse cultures, you got everything you need within Spain. Like the difference between País Vasco and Catalunya, for example, it's night and day. Or Andalusia. This is what I most love about Spain. This small geographic area with such a diverse cultural heritage. So I got to travel throughout Spain. Now, while I was in Spain, I kind of felt that at certain times it was easier to be friends with the Latin Americans living in Spain than it was to be friends with the Spaniards. And I think it might be not necessarily because of the Spanish character, more the European character, which is a lot like, say, big city American culture, like New York culture. I found that with Latin Americans like Colombians, Ecuadorians, Mexicans that I met, right away we would hit it off and we would hang out and everything. And it was a little bit harder with some of the Spaniards. I did feel that connection was missing in some cases. Luckily, I used a very important linguistic tool to get more language exchanges. And what was that? Well, luckily I would always hang out with really beautiful American girls. Like my current girlfriend, Briana, for example, who I met in Spain and who was my travel buddy. That was like 4 years ago. We're still together. I love her to death. And Briana and another girl, Christy. These girls were just so fun and, of course, attractive to Spaniards that we ended up getting like different language exchanges just probably because the Spaniards were interested in spending time with these beautiful American girls. Well, that's understandable. So luckily, through this kind of this side effect of being friends with these beautiful women, I got to do a lot of language exchanges. You know, they'd call me up, we'd go out and practice my Spanish. So that's a good tip. If you're going to be going out with a group, right, you want to really immerse yourself in the language, find some really beautiful women to hang out with. And I'm sure there will be a lot of native Spanish speakers interested in practicing their English with them. While I was in Spain, I continued practicing my podcast every day. So every day I would listen to my podcasts, and usually Cabrealos, and that was also a key, you know, just listening, 2-3 hours a day. While I was studying abroad, I tried to limit my communication with Americans, and my friend Briana, who I had originally met at the consulate, Spanish consulate, we started traveling together, and later we started dating, and, you know, she's my current girlfriend. So, you know, studying abroad, learning a language can really change your entire life course. You know, this is, you know, the woman I love and I want to be with probably for the rest of my life. And if not for Spain, I would have never met her. So, what else? Let's see how we're doing on time here. 8:51. Okay. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is the emphasis on correction. When I was in Spain, especially when I was working in the bar as a language exchange host, I always try to tell people right away, hey, if I make a mistake, please correct me. A lot of times people have the wrong attitude about being corrected. And I think when people corrected me, I always remembered in the future. Or if somebody corrects you and you make that same mistake again, you always have that little inkling that you're saying something wrong. And over time that inkling develops, you look it up, and you find out that, wow, yeah, you really did say it wrong. So I think that when somebody corrects my Spanish, it's a really, it really me llega al corazón. You know, it's something that really helps me, and I appreciate it. As long as it's constructive criticism. I don't mind if I'm speaking crappy Spanish and somebody, you know, tells me what it is I need to do to improve my Spanish. But there were some people that were downright rude because I was from the United States. Um, but we'll get into that in another post. Anyway, when I was in Spain, after around 4 or 5 months, I hit a plateau, or an apparent plateau. And at that time, I thought, am I really improving? Am I getting better at Spanish? The problem is, at a certain level, when you're learning languages, you start realizing that you have a much better ear for the language than what you're able to say, what you're able to speak. So I think that one of the reasons why I thought I was hitting a plateau is because my comprehension was improving exponentially while I was living in Spain, just by being around Spaniards all the time. But my fluency and my overall speaking ability was not improving concomitantly. And so I think that when it comes to a plateau in your language learning, sometimes it's just it's just a fake plateau. That is, your English is still improving, but because your Spanish, English, whatever language is still improving, but because you're getting so much better at the listening part, you don't really realize that the reason why you think you're plateauing is because you have a much more adept ear for the language, and you can tell what's missing. So I think that when you hit a plateau, the most important thing is just take it easy. Go out with some friends, have a few drinks. Don't think so much about the language. Like right now, for example, I haven't lived in any Spanish-speaking country for like 3 or 4 years now. And sometimes I feel like I'm hitting a plateau. And whenever I do that, I just go out with friends, some Spanish-speaking friends. If I feel like speaking Spanish, I do. If not, I speak in English. Take it easy, All right, so 12 minutes. I'm going to stop this part here. We'll get on to section 5. And, thanks for tuning in.